Right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining. I am Melissa McGurk, one of the international trade managers on EDPNC's international trade team. And this morning, we will be covering making the most of international marketing. And I'm pleased to introduce you to Mary Claire Whitaker. Mary Claire Whitaker is our team's consultant based in Mexico City, and her team serves our North Carolina companies, assisting them with myriad of requests to help you to reach and succeed in Mexico. And she will be introducing her panel in a moment. First, I just very quickly want to make sure that those of you that got to this webinar for the first time through a referral and perhaps are unfamiliar with our team, that I just give you some kind of top line pieces of information. So the international trade team at EDPNC, we have free services and grant opportunities to help you with your international business growth. Mary Claire's consulting services is an example of foreign office. We have Mexico, Canada, Europe, as well as the Middle East covered, that our team can help you with from that perspective. We also offer export compliance education webinars at no cost to you. And we have a grant program at the end of the call. I will give you a heads up about a couple of upcoming webinars that will give you more information about the grant program. But at this time, I will turn it over to Mary Claire to introduce the panel for today.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. Nice to meet y'all. Anyone that I haven't had the pleasure of making the acquaintance with. So just to kind of expand a little bit on what our office does in Mexico, a lot of it is kind of the precursor or even direct marketing. You can consider some of what our office does as marketing services. I actually used to work in marketing before I quit my job at an ad agency in Virginia and moved to Mexico 15 years ago. So when Melissa asked for a topic suggestion for this coffee talk, I thought, I'm not sure if our international companies or, the companies that are going international, whether they're new or seasoned exporters, how much time they've really been able to make for marketing, even though I think personally it's probably one of the most important steps in going international. I mean, I think domestically you've gotten the chance a lot of times to grow your business a little bit more organically. You're selling where you're from. A lot of times people do really rely successfully on word of mouth as they're growing their business. But one of these steps in scaling your business, reaching another level of business maturity, is export, and is really kind of concentrating some effort on marketing. So that being said, I know it's not necessarily something that people have a huge budget for, especially when international, because this is kind of an experimental phase sometimes for a lot of folks. We're trying to find our feet. So I think that digital marketing is an important first step. We've got David Mamila of Ixtin Agency and Alberto Torres of Ixi Studio, who are digital marketing experts. They have two different companies, but they often work in tandem. So you could think of it, Alberto as kind of the creative and branding side, and David is kind of the digital strategy, marketing reach side. These guys are indeed, I would say, experts not only in that type of marketing, but also marketing for Mexico. If you guys probably saw their bios on the invitation to this coffee talk, they both are based in Mexico or Mexican, have experience in the US and Canada, but they also have quite a bit of experience in Mexico, not only for Mexican companies, but also for international companies that are coming into Mexico. So just to mention some of their clients that they've worked on together: GlaxoSmithKline, Microsoft, HP, Expedia, some of these transnational brands. We've also got some more local brands: Spartan Race, Deportes Marti, which is a sporting goods chain in Mexico. Novotel is a hotel chain in Mexico, and even some smaller brands. Kerbal Space Program is a gaming platform, and Lucky Dog is some dog food, dog treats. So they've got a pretty diverse perspective on ways to make marketing work for companies. And I was also particularly impressed as I was working with them to kind of prepare this talk today. They actually have a term for this concept that kind of goes a little bit beyond localization. They'll talk about it, but this term transcreation. So it's combining translation and creation. But it is a little bit more. And I think, one of the reasons why marketing is such an important step in going international, you needed to accelerate these conversations that you might have had organically in the past. But marketing isn't just talking, it's listening to the local market. And I think that becomes even more important in international, because we are new to the market. Most of us are unfamiliar with the international market that we're trying to go into. So we'll talk about that. They'll talk about that. I'm gonna pass it over to them in a moment. But just one more point, I think a lot of us, myself included, even though I come from a marketing background, tend to think that these concept of branding is, for companies like Apple. Or these larger companies, but I want to just emphasize that when you're thinking about your brand, you're really thinking about your company's values and your value proposition, and having that very clear, both domestically, is going to help you a ton when you're going international, and especially if you're scaling through a partner, you're equipping local partners to really communicate about your company effectively. So with that, I am going to turn over to Alberto and David, and I'll still be chiming in, and I want to invite anyone on the call to chime in and interrupt us if you have any questions, whether that's vocally or in the chat. So yeah, come on and please join us, Alberto and David.
Yeah, let me know if you have any trouble with the screen share.
Yeah. Hey guys. Yeah, let me share my screen to just
We can
show
see.
you. Yeah. Can you see this in full screen now?
Perfect. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, we're this is an alliance. So we're Ixi Studio on the more creative side and on the branding side of things. And then we have Xteen as well, which they focus on marketing and just getting the, just kind of like getting the channels and all the marketing data too. So it's like creative would be like creating the store, and then like marketing would be like bringing the people to the store, right? That's kind of like the analysis we do. Yeah, so we're here to talk about international marketing. Just kind of like quickly give you a few tips that can for sure help you in this road of bringing your product, your services to Mexico in this case. Yeah, using marketing to accelerate your business international, right? So that's our topic. So let's go into our tips. And I think this one is for you, David.
Yes. So thank you, Melissa, Marie-Claire, for that intro. And thanks, Alberto, for setting us up. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like Marie-Claire said, please don't be shy. If you have any questions, you can pop them on the chat or let us know. But we'll get started. The whole idea here is to just go through a few quick tips, and we'll share with you some tactics also to implement this. The idea being that some of this information is information you can act on very quickly yourselves. And like Marie-Claire said, if it makes sense, you can also have an idea of a roadmap of things you can ask for in your local partners to execute for you. And we've tried to organize these chronologically in terms of which ones you should tackle in what order. And the first one is having a marketing objective. When you go into a new market, you really want to know what you're trying to achieve in order of priority, and again, probably in chronological order. And revenue might be the first thing that comes to mind. Obviously, if we're going into a new market, we want to generate revenue out of it. But that's not necessarily the first thing you need to think of. Thinking in terms of short, medium, and long-term goals, considering that you need to build your funnel, right? So again, like Marie-Claire was saying, sometimes we think that as not big global brands, maybe we don't need to focus that much at the top and in terms of our brand presence and recognition. But the reality is we always need that. We need people to know who we are before they can buy from us. And thinking of that explicitly and making that an explicit objective helps you, and then progressively bringing people towards the purchase. And that can be a very quick cycle, or it could be a very long cycle, but making it explicit will help you. So thinking in terms of how do I want to position my brand, and Alberto will share a little bit more about that. But thinking about filling my pipeline of prospects, or maybe I want to grab a piece of the market share, and making those objectives explicit will help you plan and decide for everything else. Eventually, we have to get to revenue, of course, but we need to build towards that. And if we go into the next slide, Alberto, something that we've seen really helps, and Marie-Claire was talking about how sometimes your growth locally could have been very organic. But if you try to think about your current growth and what has worked for you locally, try to make that experience explicit. Try to think back and, well, I met with these people from this Chamber of Commerce. And from there, we had a few conversations, and XYZ became our customers. Okay, what does that really mean? Well, that means you sat down with you identified prospective clients, and you sat down with them. They got to know your company and what kind of information you shared with them. So if you try to make those steps explicit, you can from there narrow down which ones you feel that you need to tackle first in your new market, in this case, Mexico. But make that journey explicit and try to think about it chronologically. And to me, I always come back to the funnel. If they don't know I exist, if they don't know that my product category exists, they're never going to buy from me. So making that as clear and explicit as possible will really help you. And if we go to the next slide, please.
David,
yes.
I would love periodic examples, and it looks like this next slide might be a really nice example. I'm sure it would help solidify that for us in our minds. So any opportunity you can to give examples of companies you've worked with would be great.
Absolutely. And we have some examples sprinkled throughout this deck
Perfect.
that we're going to share with you guys.
Great, thank you.
And we'll bring up others as well as we talk. But this is an example I really like to share because this is a brand we worked with in Mexico locally, Deportes Martí, a sports retailer. And when we started working with them, the sales were not great. That was a very clearly identified problem. The brands that they worked with were doing okay. So they worked with your regular sporting goods brands, your Nikes, your Adidas, all those brands were doing fine. They were just not being bought from our client. And what we realized, if you look at the image on the left, that was their Instagram feed before we came in. And it all looks pretty generic. And there's really no way to recognize there's a brand present in there. So I look at those photos and I look at those products and they're cool. And I'm going to go buy them, whatever. So what we worked on the right, and we really pushed this, was you have to know us as a brand, right? So these are our colors. This is our logo. This is what we want you to recognize. Once we achieve that recognition, then we can work on the following steps, which is getting you into the store. But at least now you know we exist, you know what we look like, and when you walk across any other piece of our communication, from billboards to TV ads to the actual store, there's a connection already established. So you're more likely to engage in business with us, right? And so for almost a year, this was our objective, and this is what we were measuring. And then it trickles down. But it really made no sense for us to push language around, let's say, sales promotions, if people didn't know we existed as a brand to begin with. And so this is why I always emphasize the chronological aspect of it, right? And I always make this analogy in business with dating, which is, before I can ask you your hand in marriage, you have to know why I exist, right? So let me introduce myself. Then we can go grab a coffee, we'll go to dinner a few times. Then maybe we can, formalize things. So think about it that way. Think of your marketing objective as kind of the next logical step you need your prospective customers to take. In this case, probably first they have to know you exist, right?
Yeah,
And then build your marketing
that's
objectives.
just so perfect. Not only do I love the visual, but I love the analogy. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. And so that's why having your marketing objective present is so important. And then if we go into the next one, please.
Sure.
And so the second, and these go hand in hand, is doing a market analysis. It is very easy to assume that whatever has happened locally and whatever the reality is locally will be the same reality in the new country you want to explore. Oh, it's just a different language, but people behave and buy the same. The reality is that's not the case at all. Of course, there's going to be a lot of similarities. And of course, because of the way we operate is so global now, you're going to have coincidences. That's where your opportunity lies. But there's also going to be differences. So if you're already doing business locally, again, try to make things explicit, right? So why are we doing business together? How did you find out that I existed? What made you choose me? And if you're not yet doing business in this new place, that's okay. You just need to ask these questions explicitly, So are there any market or legal requirements that you're maybe unaware of? How can you find out? What are your customer pain points? They might not be the same as they are locally. How are they going to use the product, right? What's the chain of command? What's the way of making a choice? And I'll use a very quick example here. We worked with, and we'll actually use them as an example later on as well. We worked with a infrastructure as a service platform from Canada that came into Mexico and other geographies. And one of the things we found out was that the decision-making process in Mexico was way more vertical, right? So decision makers were not as independent as in Canada in a business structure. Everyone, all the way to the top, had to give in their buy-in for a purchase to happen. So now that I know this, I need to make decisions accordingly. But this stage, doing your market analysis, has to do with asking these questions explicitly, looking at your competitors. What are they offering? Maybe you have an advantage, maybe you don't. But all of these just make it explicit. And if we go into the next slide, please. So one thing you can do is just, again, a lot of what you're going to hear is making things explicit that might have been organic in your local market, but make a list, describe the companies in your destination market, right? And we go back to this idea of talking to them. Why have they shown interest? Again, if you're already doing business, right? And then another thing to consider is use self-serve quantitative tools. When we think market analysis, sometimes we think of, a market study that can be very expensive, that can take a lot of time. And of course, that's useful. But if you don't have those resources, there's a lot of tools you can use yourself that will give you a picture of what's happening. Answer the Public this is the name of the tool, Answer the Public. You can find it online. It's free. It'll give you insights into what people are searching for and how they're framing their questions. Google Trends, also a free tool, will give you a lot of information. And if we go to the next slide,
I have an interjection.
Yes, please, Mary Claire.
Those last two slides, those are things that you might not realize that you already have. I mean, just the generating of a contact list is literally a deliverable that our office will do for you guys for free from EDPNC. And in generating that contact list, a lot of times we are getting the ball rolling on some of these previous steps, just about figuring out the decision-making structure, figuring out the competition, just to get people to confirm their contact information and interest in considering your product. So, I mean, I think I like that you keep using this word, Debbie, make explicit. Just sit down and look at what it is you already have. Because I think a lot of times, you know, you're not necessarily starting from scratch. There is some information that you've already got access to in this process.
Thanks for bringing that up, Mary Claire. At the end of the call, I'll have anybody on my team kind of say a little hello to make sure you can plug in with the international offices via your trade manager. Just as Mary Claire said, we have some systems in place to help you to launch some of this information.
Perfect. If we go to the next one, Alberto, please.
Sure.
Thank you. And so this is a little exercise I did for this call right before, like a couple days ago. I had a look at the list of people who were maybe joining us today, and I know one of you is in the nature beauty care products. And so I plugged that into Answer the Public for the US in English and for Mexico in Spanish, right? And so these are the type of queries that people are using in search engines around natural beauty care products, right? And so there's a few things that I think are, blue is in English in the US, green is in Spanish in Mexico. And I think there's a few things that are interesting because for those who speak Spanish, the Mexican queries relate a lot to reselling, right? So people are looking for possible names for brands of natural beauty care products or how to sell them, right? So some of them are looking for stores. But I think it's interesting if I were in this position that maybe I can look at opportunities to resell through smaller independent resellers because there's interest in that space, right? Also, in Mexico, people are using the word organic as part of their searches, whereas in the US, they're not, right? So this is the kind of information that can help me adjust my positioning, adjust my language, or even my market strategy, because now I have a little bit of a better picture of what's happening locally. And you can do this, again, Answer the Public, Google Trends. These are free tools that can give you a first understanding, you know, that you can do yourself, or again, you can work through a partner, but this is something very, very quick you can do to start getting a picture of what's happening in your new target market. And I think, Alberto, next one's with you.
Hey, so yes, exactly. What David said is kind of like the usual process we do, right? We assign our objective, short term and long term. We check our marketing analysis, see what the environment is like, you know, what are people reacting, what are they doing in our new market. And then we talk about brand positioning, right? And here, for example, I know a lot of you guys already have websites, logos, but a brand sometimes goes a little bit beyond that, right? In this case, for example, the first bullet point talks about a brand essence, a brand origin that is very closely related to the USP, the unique selling proposition of your business. So, I mean, we know what the customer sensibilities are. We know what they're looking for in the words. Now we need to adjust our messaging and tone of our brand to that market, right? Because they are looking for different things, we may need different messages. Do we know, for example, from our company, what is our brand promise? Like Mary Claire said at the beginning, sometimes we think that this is something that bigger companies do, but this can very well be used by smaller companies, and it gives you like a true like communication line, right? So we know the messages, but we also know what we're delivering. So those two have to be aligned, right? The messaging in our campaigns, in our like ad websites, advertising pieces and such. The second bullet point talk about the target audience, right? Okay. This new market, we know what keywords they may be using to look for our products. But like, for example, how do we know how, I mean, do we know that our messages are like tailored for them to respond to those searches, you know, like for example, a proper tone will help us like with the new market, correct? So what is the tone, right? In communications, okay, you can say something, right? For example, like I sell hosting. Sure, but what does that mean in Mexico? Are people like really receptive to that? I sell hosting in Mexico, or they wanna, you know, they want perhaps something a little more exciting, a little something that showcases the features of the product. Maybe, you know, what are the characteristics, or is it more of an emotional tone? You know, I just want like hosting that feels safe, that feels troubleless, you know? So those are the kinds of things that we also need to consider when going into a new market. And also evaluate what others, our competition, are doing in the same industry in terms of messaging. So we know about the marketing environment from the marketing analysis, but what are they saying, right? Like, how are they positioning themselves in the industry, in their brand positioning, and also analyze their strengths and weaknesses. Because if you focus on something, you may be like, I mean, that means that there are other areas that we can explore, right? In terms of messaging. And we're going to see an example of how that looks in a minute. So here, my recommendation would be, like, if you're not sure what your brand positioning is, like pretty much gather feedback from your current branding efforts. Talk to your users, see how they are perceiving your messaging. And from there, you're gonna be able to determine if your brand promise is being delivered, right? So what you're promising in your advertising, in your communications, is that aligned with what they're getting, right? So, I mean, that's what we want, you know, a line of communication from like the promise to what you deliver on the experience when the user finally goes to your brand and uses your product or services and your company. And also, I mean, it's like we said, it's good to have evidence, right? Like do we have testimonials? Do we have feedback from our clients? Like, do we know this is in a fact? Are most of our users getting this information, or is it unclear, right? So here I'm gonna show you an example of what, like a quick like overview of the industry of this client of us, which is a rock climbing like a guided rock climbing service in so I mean, this is what we do, right? So I mean, these are their competitors. What we want to know is what pictures are they using, you know, like what kind of eye candy are they using? Are they focusing on like being you know, like the landscape of the place, you know, like how beautiful the place could be? We can see that this second one, Stone Adventures, also focuses on like landscape pictures and people climbing. We know that, for example, of pricing adventure guides, they have a welcome video. So, I mean, that can give them, you know, like a little extra attention. And the fourth one, Mojave Guide, has like a generic landscape and a quick Instagram feed, right? So this is how, like, first-hand information we're getting from them. We also get their text. How are they positioning themselves in terms of the text as well, right? Like some may be really straightforward, custom guided climbing, right? And then PCGI courses, which is like a technical aspect of rock climbing. Other one, like the second one, Stone Adventures, just goes like rock climbing guides. That's their headline, right? It's like pretty straightforward. So like the third one, Pricing Adventure, private guiding, backcountry climbing, trips, courses. Here we start seeing like a little of a different messaging. I mean, they are not just talking about rock climbing in general, but they are talking about private guiding, backcountry climbing. So it's slightly a different, no, it's completely a different messaging, a different positioning they're looking for. And the fourth one has guided rock climbing and instruction, right? So, I mean, we can see that these four, they haven't really they are barely starting their branding efforts. They don't have a clear position. So in the third column, we're gonna see this column can vary depending on your industry. In this case, from the marketing analysis, we know that a lot of people care about their accreditation, right? Like if you go with a rock climbing guide, how is this guy or girl a good guide, right? Does he know what he's talking about? So we know that, for example, we went into some have like 3 Yelp reviews, TripAdvisor reviews, so that gives them a little bit of more accreditation. Some others have more of a technical aspect, like the second one, TripAdvisor, they have courses, they have a specific technical stuff, certifications, so they are also well accredited. The other ones, the third one, or Pricing Adventures, they have partnerships with bigger associations as well. They don't showcase as much of their high level accreditation, but they showcase their partnership with this other organization, like the Boy Scouts, Outside Online. And the fourth one, we have again reviews. So this is something you want to do. I mean, when you come into a market, you want to see what your competition is doing, what messages they are delivering, is it working for them? So you don't repeat the same thing. So you find your unique selling proposition, your unique brand essence, and you contribute to this. You add a new, hopefully more defined brand, right? Like brand positioning and messaging. So that's the first tip. I mean, check your brand positioning, where you are, who you are, how's your messaging working? Does that work with the public and such, right? And adjust your messaging for that.
I would say that accreditation one, just to kind of hit that, is really important. Like when we're talking to Mexican customers and partners for y'all, whatever industry you're in usually has its own specific certifications, but also very well-known clients of reference. If you've worked, maybe you don't have a client in Mexico. If you do, certainly I would mention that, because a lot of them are attuned to, okay, maybe you did really well in the US, Mexico is a different ballgame. Can you successfully deliver here? So I would say that point for international is particularly important, just because they want to know you're well enough developed in what you offer to be able to offer it internationally.
Correct. So the next tip, so we know our brand positioning and we know our market. Now it's time to design something for our market, right? So in terms of advertising, or in terms of promotion, in terms of presence, the first thing is to evaluate what we currently have, right? I mean, does that work for us now? Can we reuse some of these assets? Do we have a brand kit, for example? That probably has to persist. I mean, your logo, your essence has to persist. Do we have past campaigns as well? I mean, just check them out. I mean, you may be able to reuse them. I mean, you use as much of that as you can, right? But it's to evaluate, right? I mean, can we use it? I mean, is it good to use it? Is it good for ourselves? The second bullet talks about, and now you consider, right? Review if is that effective in this new market. So, and here comes this whole thing with transcreating something. So here I'm going to make a distinction between translating and transcreating, right? So translating, if you have your website and you just want to translate it, that means that we want to, maintain the same messaging. Be really close to that messaging, just translate it to a different language. It's like when you translate a book almost. You want to keep the same ideas, the same overall messaging, but just in a different language, right? And transcreating, when we talk about that, it's a bit more creative, right? It's like doing a creative localization. What we care about in this case is if the brand essence, if your brand positioning generates and the emotional impact of your brand, right? Like if your brand essence and emotional impact are gonna be represented in that transcreation, right? So this is a little more contextual. If you say something in English in the US market, might not mean the same thing in the Mexican market, right? So we have in that transcreation, we consider culture and context, obviously, of your local and new market, right? So for this, what I recommend is definitely, another session of feedback, right? On your new market, can we get feedback from our users? What are they like? Can they react to it? For example, if people, the phenotype look different, should we use the same pictures really? Or is that going to feel too foreign to the new market, right? Too distant, or even the messaging, right? You may know your context well in the US, but it might just be completely just misunderstood in a new market or in Mexico, right? So here we're gonna see an example of what that means. In this case, on the left side, we get this. We see this piece, this advertising from. That's what we got, right? Like this is what we use in the US, and we're trying to market in Mexico. So the text reads, this experience could be cut short by RSV, right? Which is a respiratory syncytial virus. We see the design as well. Some things we consider that weren't right is like, okay, the imagery is kind of hard to swallow. It's like you see this picture in the background, but it's just kind of hard to interpret because it's barely shown, right? So one of the things we did on the right when transcreated is just give it more room, for example, to the image. Right? In this case, just so the user can see, it's a design thing, consideration, just to display more of the image so it can be clearer. Also, for example, in the transcreated version, if you like, I'm gonna just kind of like translate quickly what it says, right? If you don't know Spanish, it means like interrupted plans, never, right? So that's our headline. So on the left one, it's more of almost like a threatening situation, right? Like this experience could be cut short, right? By RSV. It's like, oh, it's like danger. Like, wow, I gotta watch out for this. But here in Mexico, what works more is like this more of a empowering situation, right? Where I'm not going to interrupt my life, never, right? Because of this. So it's more of like, I'm going to fight this situation. I have the tools I need for this to overcome this and keep living my life. So we have almost like a warning on the left and like a more empowering situation on the right. And because that works better for that industry in Mexico. Okay. So I'm going to continue to the next one. I hope that was clear. I think this is you, David.
Yes, thank you. And so again, continuing with this chronological logic, we've we've seen what the market looks like and what they're interested in. We've refined our position and again, made it explicit. We've adjusted our content to match what's happening in the new local market. Now we have to go out there and talk to people, right? And so the way we like to look at this is the first obvious question is, where is our audience? Is our audience on LinkedIn? Is our audience looking at pictures on Instagram? Or is our audience talking to people on trade shows or out and about, you know, in the city? Which city? Are they mostly in Mexico City, or are they mostly in the north or in the south? You know, like where are they? But not only where are they, but also where are they when they're thinking about the problem that we solve, right? Because, you know, most people are on Instagram, but when our audience is on Instagram, are they looking at information that relates to their jobs, or are they looking at cat videos? You know, and we maybe don't want to interrupt the cat video watching experience. You know, like we want to form a good relationship with them, so that's not the time to jump in. And a lot of these might sound obvious, but we go back to this idea of making it explicit, and we'll give an example. We at Xteen work a lot with the visual arts, particularly animation, right? So some of our clients are animation studios or even an animation festival. Well, those people are on Instagram for professional purposes. They are looking at potential artists and potential partners, and they're actually more active in there than they would be, say, on LinkedIn. So different audiences will use different channels differently. Let's think about that again, where they are and where they are when they're thinking about the problem that we solve. And of course, that's where we want to be. So we want to be present in those trade shows, or we want to be present on LinkedIn or on whichever those social networks or those websites could be, because again, there's specialized websites, there's web searches that might be relevant. That's where we want to be, trade publications, all of these platforms. But it is very important that we're present in the right moment. So this is why we use those two kind of variables. Where are they? And where are they when they're thinking about what problem we solve? And then we want to plan accordingly. We want to spend the most money and the most time in that perfect Venn diagram place. So where they are and where they are when they're thinking about us, right? Or the problem that we solve. If we go into the next slide, please. We keep coming back to this idea of making analogies with what has worked for you locally. And again, you want to make this explicit, even however organic your growth has been so far, you know, and we go back to this example. Well, I was just talking to, you know, my buddies on the golf course, and that's how I got all these clients. Okay, that's fine. But what's the equivalent of that golf course in your new market? What's the equivalent of that golf course in Mexico? Maybe it is literally a golf course and you want to make sure you have a sales agent there, but maybe it's something else, right? But think about those actions that have been successful locally and find their analogy in the new market. But it's very, very important that you don't assume it's going to be exactly the same. And one thing we strongly recommend all of our clients and partners is don't put all your eggs in one basket. There might be a hidden gem that you're unaware of. And the only way we're going to find it is if we allocate a little bit of space to experiment and see what's happening and what else can we exploit out of that. In the next slide, we have a very simple example of something we did for this web hosting company in Canada that started expanding internationally to the US, to Mexico, and to other geographies. And I highlighted India here. We worked with them in their expansion to India. And so again, this company is a business-to-business company, infrastructure as a service, technology services that they managed from Canada, but expanded into all of these markets. And so in Canada, they had a very well-established presence, and they used all these channels. And just for quick reference, paid search means paid advertising that appears on Google or Bing or other search engines. Affiliates refers to basically what amounts to sales agents, right? So other agents that are paid a commission off of sales. Display advertising refers to banners or video ads that you might find online. Remarketing is a very effective channel where you only advertise to people who have already visited your website. And the SEO refers to all the efforts so that your website appears first on online searches without having to pay directly for that presence, right? So that's what you see on the first column. And then what you can see are the percentages are the splits of how much money we spent per channel in each country. And so there's a few ones that are kind of really obvious. So for instance, in the US, we spent most of the marketing budget in affiliates. Why? Because the SEO game, the organic positioning game, was extremely competitive. So we knew we were never going to be able to reach page 1 of Google results, without having to spend a lot of money that we didn't have. But these affiliates had already spent that money. So we were better off partnering with them in the US and kind of reaping the benefits of that. That was the case in the US, but that wasn't really the case, say, in Mexico or India, right? So in Mexico and India, because businesses were not as savvy in terms of positioning on search engines, we spent money there because we knew we could win that battle, right? And we didn't spend almost any money on paid search in those same geographies because we were going to get the positioning organically. It didn't make sense to pay for those clicks. Whereas in Canada, we did. We spent that money there. So different markets, because they're in different stages of maturity themselves, because the audience behaves differently, because you have different marketing objectives, you want to adjust your plan and your budgets accordingly. And again, we have to be very, very aware of where our audience is and where they're thinking about the problem that we solve, right? Always relating this to your marketing objectives. But anyways, this is a very important thing.
I love it, David. This is so interesting. So interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. And again, very, very important thing, guys, is don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to make sure you diversify at least some of your efforts to find those hidden gems and not to place yourselves in danger if for whichever reason that one channel would fail. And so we can move on to the next one, which I think, Alberto, is yours.
Hey, thanks. Yes. Yeah, as we know, measure things, right, to improve. So measuring in terms of analytics, in terms of how all this money is spent on different channels, how is that working for you, really? Because measuring is not just about numbers, like you say. It's about knowing what's happening so we can make informed decisions. In that past example, I think that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, they understand from their initial probably results that that certain markets need different things, right? So it's about making informed decisions to achieve the different goals, right? Also, in the feedback we start getting from all these campaigns, we'll know more and more about how the audience, the insights. What do they want? I mean, what do they prefer? It's a little bit of a road there, right? But the more we gather information and the more we do it, the more we'll know exactly what the trends are, the audience preferences. Based on that, exactly adjust your budget. In this case, we just saw it in the last example, allocate the budget to the channels that work the best, that give you the best results. If this is like a sales campaign, well, your return of investment, how much money you put in versus how much money you're generating in sales. Like that's a good point to check as well. If this is an awareness, like a brand awareness, like barely coming into the market, like check if you got enough followers on, on your social media, just the results and how's that working for you. Also, from all this feedback we get from the campaigns, we can adjust the design as well, the messaging, the imagery, which one works best, what text, what subject line, what headline, what picture work best in that market that aligns with your brand, obviously. And that's called, even that question, right? Can the campaign design be sharpened? Probably yes. We always adjust a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but just a little bit. Oh, this one worked better. Okay, let's use this one as a featured ad, right? So again, that's a recommendation, a tactic. Check your analytics if you're doing digital. If you're doing offline, also check what the current marketing efforts are, how are they working. Also gather that information. Do you know how your users are behaving when traversing your campaigns? Like maybe the users like the ads, maybe they click on the ad, maybe they grab your flyer, they go to your booth, but maybe they don't, there's like a pain point there, maybe once they get to your booth, they don't understand. There's a lost of, there's a lost connection there where the user kind of just abandons the process, right? So do we know if there are any pain points in your funnel? And with that, again, do you know who and what to prioritize? Like what users are really turning into sales? What users are just visiting for, just for information, and maybe eventually do they become a customer? What channel, right? Like David mentioned perfectly, which one is working better? If your LinkedIn or your Instagram or your trade shows are working better, well, then that needs more prioritization, because you will get more results. So in the example, we will, this is an example of analytics, right? Like in this case, we're showing you here what technology is being used to access your website, right? In this case, from here we can tell, we have information we can interpret, right? For example, this is in Spanish, so I'm going to translate a little bit. It says that for this website, like the highest amount of users are using iOS, so iPhones or Apple tablets, right, to access this website, right? So what does that tell us, right? And in the third place, we have also Macintosh, which is desktop Apples, right? So we know the market share for like iOS usage in general is 25%. But is that 25% like related to us, or is it more for us? Is it more like 50%? Then we for sure need to test, make sure that our like assets work in this platform like Excel perfectly, right? Because we have it's like one of our top like targets. We also know that we can also interpret that because they have iPhones. Like probably the target audience have like certain profile, right? Like who uses iPhone? Probably somebody who is either like a higher end phone, right? Like it's like tends to be like a higher end phone, smartphone, versus like a more popular option, right? So we know that our audience like has this kind of taste, right? So we can also interpret through that. Are they on their phones or are they using desktop, right? Like it looks like in this case we need to consider both. I wouldn't put my money into making the tablet in this case a better like improving the tablet version because like there are so little, like so few clicks in there, right? So, but if I was to put money into or effort into like making my website better, it would have to be for mobile or desktop. And obviously we can compare these analytics to this user behavior to like our sales as well, right? Like there are other areas of analytics here that we can like we can benchmark to see which one of those convert to sales more, you know, and then optimize for that in terms of technology or in terms of messaging, in terms of design, right? Again, smart TVs, I wouldn't at all put any efforts on that as of now. If you're a smaller company, because there are like almost no one using smart TVs to access and reserve, you know, in this case.
Alberto, we had a question. Someone is asking, is this data Google Analytics? They missed when you said the tool that you were using there.
Yeah, this is standard Google Analytics with the conventional tag, right, which is G-tag installed. So this is a free thing. It's a free tool that you can put on your website. And also once you install it, also make sure you go and check like what the numbers are. Sometimes it can be, I mean, you can I think you can pretty like easily get a good idea of what's happening. You know, how many users, how are they accessing your stuff, and how are they behaving, you know, once they hit your website in this case.
Sounds good. Hey, Alberto, David, our time is running short. So we need to flip through to the end of your slide. Is there any, do you have your contact information?
Sure. Sure. Let's go to the, yeah, obviously this is the last slide. We're gonna jump it this time. This is the summary. Yeah, our contact information is it's right here.
Yeah, and one topic I know that some people might be interested in that we may have run out of time for is there was a slide that you had to skip through that was talking about local partners.
Sure.
And so what I would, if you could maybe just say one or two key takeaways, and then any follow-on, the folks can reach out to you directly on your email to see if they can get more, you know, more direct feedback for their local partner situation, but maybe just one or two key sentences, takeaways for this page.
Yeah, absolutely. And so really quickly, and just to say very quickly on the previous point, the example focused a lot on digital, but keep in mind that measuring and adjusting applies to all channels. So this trade show would do better than this other one, etc. And then just on local partners, the way we look at it is think about your core business and then think about everything that goes around it. And think about your own experience. Which of those things around your core business are mostly impacted by localization? So an example we always give is support, right? So maybe having a local team for support is important because it's going to be impacted by language, of course, but also by other elements. Think about what only you can do. Think about what maybe you'd outsource locally. Those are probably the elements you want to talk to in terms of your local partners. And I do want to tie it back to something Marie-Claire said that it's super important is your local partners are not going to do the marketing for you. They're not going to do your brand positioning for you. You own that, and you need to be able to supply them with tools to execute, right? So that's absolutely critical. And then Alberto, if you want to go to the last slide, just in terms of our contact information, you know, we can talk about all of these elements we've run through in this presentation. We can help you with that. We can help you also find other experts in other areas locally, specifically for Mexico, maybe also other markets. But please take a screenshot, and we can also put it on the chat so you can easily copy paste.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, go ahead and put that on the chat. That would be great. Yeah, and just like David was saying, these experts have partnerships with businesses in the United States. And that's significant because I typed in the chat, just a little heads up, that this is the time of year when companies should be thinking about their plans, their international outreach, and export plans for the next year, because October is the US federal government's fiscal year start. And so our STEP grant, the State Trade Expansion Program grant, which we are waiting for our official award letter to be able to advertise any specifics. So we're in the waiting zone for that, but we are usually able to support international digital outreach efforts with the grant program to U.S. Service providers. And so David and Alberto, they have those relationships. So if you have inquiries, our team can tell you more about that. September 10th and I believe September 18th are dates to keep in mind to get more information about the upcoming grant support. Go to our events page for those details. If you are not already receiving notifications about our webinars and coffee talks, please make sure you go to our export page on the edpnc.com website and scroll to the bottom on the right-hand side. You could sign up for our export newsletter, and that will ensure that you're notified about all of our events, virtual and trade show related. Mary Claire, do you have any closing words as we're wrapping up?
I have, there's so much more we could go into.
I know, and we're already over. There's so much more. Yes.
I know David and Alberto, and you guys can speak for yourselves on this, but they have expressed, they're definitely open to chatting with anyone about further questions outside of the webinar. And they, as you can see, they've put their contact information in the chat too.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining, for all of your time and expertise. And I'm sure that people will be reaching out with further questions.
Yes, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Mary Claire. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you, guys.
Bye-bye. Take
Yes.
care.
Alberto and David.